A long time ago, in a small village, there was an old woman whom everyone loved. She was always cheerful and willing to help others. Villagers often came to her for advice or to share their troubles in life. One day, a young man visited her and asked, "Why are you always happy? Do you never feel sad, even when bad things happen?" The old woman smiled kindly and replied, "Life has its ups and downs. There are good days and bad days. But I have learned that happiness doesn't come from what happens around us. It comes from within." Curious, the young man asked, "Can you explain that more clearly?" The old woman began to tell her story. When she was young, she had a happy family, even though they were not wealthy. But then, her husband fell seriously ill, and the family could not afford medicine. He passed away, leaving behind immense sorrow. She thought she would never be happy again, but over time, she realized that drowning in sadness could not change the past. She decided to find joy in small things every day, the sunlight, blooming flowers, or a warm smile. From then on, she remained happy because she understood that happiness is a choice, not a condition. She continued her story. When her husband died, it was the most painful time of her life. She cried for many days, feeling like she would never be happy again. The loss was too great, and she didn't know how to continue living without her life partner. But one day, she realized that staying trapped in grief would not change anything. She still had children to take care of, and she couldn't let sorrow consume her forever. She decided to change her perspective on life. Instead of focusing on what she had lost, she started paying attention to the small things she still had. Every morning, she told herself, "Today is a new day, and I will find something to be grateful for." Some days were easy, but others were very difficult. However, she always tried to find something to smile about, even if it was just the bright sunshine, a newly bloomed flower, or the smile of a friend. The young man then asked, "But what if something truly terrible happens? How do you still stay happy?" The old woman gently replied, "Nothing lasts forever, not even bad things. When sadness comes, I remind myself, this too shall pass. Instead of focusing on pain, I look at what I still have, my health, my friends, or simply the fact that I am still alive." She smiled and added, "Happiness is a choice. We can choose to focus on negativity and suffering, or we can choose to find the good things, no matter how small, to bring us joy. It's not always easy, but it is possible." The young man listened carefully and felt like he had learned something important. He left the old woman's house with a new thought. Instead of waiting for happiness, he would actively seek it in simple, everyday things. He decided to apply the old woman's advice. Each morning when he woke up, instead of thinking about life's difficulties, he told himself, "Today is a new day, and I will find something to be grateful for." At first, this was not easy. He still felt sad at times, and bad days still came. But he remembered the old woman's words, that everything will pass, and he tried to focus on the positive, no matter how small. Gradually, he began to notice changes in his thoughts. In the past, when something unpleasant happened, it would ruin his entire day. But now, he learned to find something good to balance it out. If a rainy day made him feel gloomy, he reminded himself that he could enjoy a warm cup of tea. If work didn't go well, he reminded himself that at least he still had a job. The villagers began to notice his transformation. He became more optimistic, complained less, and always had a smile on his face. When asked about it, he shared the old woman's story and the valuable lessons she had taught him. Word of the story spread throughout the village. People started to see life in a new way. They realized that happiness did not depend on circumstances but on how they chose to view life. Thanks to the old woman's wisdom, the entire village became happier. People learned to appreciate small things, to see the positive side of life, and not to let difficulties take away their joy. The old woman didn't just change the life of one young man. She helped the entire village understand the secret of happiness. Happiness does not come from what we have, but from how we perceive life. Since learning the old woman's lesson, the young man changed his way of thinking. He no longer let difficulties or misfortunes control his emotions. Each day, he focused on finding something positive, no matter how small: a cool breeze, a delicious meal, or a pleasant conversation. People around him noticed his transformation. He no longer complained as before. Instead, he had a calm and optimistic attitude. When someone was sad or discouraged, he would share the old woman's story about how she overcame sorrow and found happiness in simple things. The story spread throughout the village. Gradually, people began applying the old woman's teachings to their own lives. They learned to accept that life had good and bad days, but what mattered was how they chose to respond. They no longer let failures or hardships take away their happiness. Thanks to the old woman's lesson, the whole village became happier. People were grateful for what they had rather than complaining about what they lost. They found joy in simple things: a peaceful afternoon, a funny story, or just knowing they were still healthy. The old woman taught an important truth. Happiness does not depend on circumstances. It depends on how we see life. Every challenge will pass, but a positive attitude will keep us strong and peaceful. As a result, the village not only became happier but also filled with love and kindness. The old woman's lesson continued to be passed down from generation to generation, helping people understand that happiness is not about what we own but how we choose to live each day. Through her teachings, the entire village gradually changed. They no longer let hardships make them unhappy for too long but learned to find joy in small things. When someone felt discouraged, they reminded each other that everything would pass and that there was always something to be grateful for. The atmosphere in the village became more positive. People smiled more and cared for each other more. When faced with misfortune, instead of complaining, they tried to find even the smallest good thing. A carpenter who lost an important order reminded himself that he still had the health to work. A mother exhausted from taking care of her child felt happy knowing her child was healthy and cheerful. These small changes created a ripple effect. The old woman helped people realize that happiness does not come from external things but is a choice from within. No one can avoid difficulties in life, but we can decide how we face them. The young man who once wondered why the old woman was always happy now understood. He learned to appreciate the little things around him, to be grateful for what he had, and not to let hardships break his spirit. Thanks to the old woman's lesson, the whole village became brighter. People learned to help each other through hard times and to find joy in everyday moments. And so, the old woman's story continued to be told through generations. It became part of the village, a precious lesson about life. No matter how difficult life gets, there is always something to be grateful for. When we learn to appreciate small things, we will find happiness in every situation.